Well, good morning. Let me just say welcome to all of our friends over at Lee Scott, and all of you here. I know that we have guests at both sites, so let me just say how much we appreciate you coming. If this is your first time and you're just here to check us out, we're glad that you are here. If there's anything that we can do to serve you, we would be glad to do that. Let me remind you of something that we announced last week that's coming up the end of this month. Celebration dinner. This is a night, actually it's going to be 2 nights this year, that is has become very important in the life of our church. We've been doing it now for, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years it seems like, and it's a time that we just come together, we kind of just break away from everything else that we normally do to do several things. One, we come together to eat. This meal is provided by Viditoris, formerly Provinos, and it's amazing. It's great food. We fellowship together, a great night of worship. It's a good time for us to vision together. We look back over what we've been doing over this last year. We look forward to some things that we see God doing on the horizon. And as I said last week, this is going to be a night when I'm going to talk about something very important that we're going to be doing as a whole church this next year. And so I want you to come and hear the details of that and see how you can be involved in that. So that's going to be happening January 24th and 25th. And this is the first time we've ever done it this way. There are 2 nights. They're the same each night. So we just need you to sign up for one of those 2 nights. Or if you just love it so much, you can sign up for both. That's fine. We'd love to have you both. But you only need to come to one. And to register, you can go to our website. There's a rotating slide right there on the home page. It says Celebration Dinner. Click on that. Register yourself. If you have kids, register them. And let us know you're coming. Obviously, we need to know for the food and for how many children we're going to be having. And so please go and do that. It's great night together. Love to see you there. All right, so this morning we're going to continue in the series that we've been in actually since October, but we took a break for a while. Now we're coming back to it, called Refined. And study of the book of 1 Peter and just looking at what God has to say about what it means for our life to be refined. In other words, for our Christian life to be honed in, to be focused, to kind of remove some impurities, some things that don't need to be there so that we can do what God needs us to do. And really that's what Peter is talking about in this book. But before we get into it today, let me ask you this. Have you ever said this phrase? Life isn't fair. No, somebody's never said that phrase. Have you thought it? Did you think about somebody else saying it? Or, anyway, life isn't fair. Like you find yourself in a position where you keep trying to do the right thing. You're doing the right thing. And for some reason, it just doesn't work out for you, Or even worse, you do the right thing, but the other person who's not doing the right thing seems to have everything going their way. And you find yourself saying this phrase, life isn't fair. What's up with this? And you might even be like this to God, what is your deal? Or if you're a parent, you may have heard your child say, it isn't fair. Have you ever heard that? Oh, that's not fair. You're being so, how many times have I heard that? Don't tell my kids I said talking about them, but it isn't fair. And I used to tell my kids, you're right, life isn't fair. God is, but life isn't fair. And, sometimes things just happen and things don't work out the way we hope they will, or sometimes we're not getting that thing that we hope we'd get out of this situation. And yet I look back and it's like we were never promised a fair life, were we? In fact, Jesus said, look, it's going to be rough and there are going to be difficulties and things that you don't see coming. And, it's not always going to work out right at the time that you hope it works out for you. In studying this week, I read this quote by John Piper. He's a pastor and an author, and some of you may have heard of him, but I thought this was really good. He said, life is not a straight line leading from one blessing to the next and then finally to heaven. Life is a winding and troubled road, switchback after switchback. And the point of biblical stories is to help us feel in our bones, not just know in our heads, that God is for us in all these strange turns. He is plotting the course and managing the troubles with far-reaching purposes for our good and for the glory of Jesus Christ. I love that. It's like, yes, God is for us and He's with us, even in all the hard turns and switchbacks and 180-degree deals that we didn't know were about to happen. But I think that you would also agree, and the truth is that while we may know this, as he said, in our heads, sometimes we might forget it in our hearts. And we lose sight of what God is trying to do, or we may forget that there is another purpose to what's happening to us, and it may be for somebody else, or it may be ultimately for God's glory. So I'm setting this up to tell you, this is what Peter is addressing this morning. We're going to be in 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 13 through 17. You can go ahead and turn there now. 1 Peter 3, 13 through 17. Peter is addressing this group of Christians, as we've mentioned before, in Asia Minor who are suffering and struggling for their faith. And who are doing good, but it may be very hard, and they may be getting discouraged, and they may be forgetting what it means to genuinely suffer as a follower of Christ. And so Peter is writing this section right here to remind them, to encourage them as they're struggling. So here's what he says, starting in verse 13. Who is going to harm you if you are eager to do good? But even if you should suffer for what is right, you are blessed. Do not fear what they fear. Do not be frightened. But in your heart, set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. It is better, if it is God's will, to suffer for doing good than for doing evil. And I love the way he starts out with that question. Who's going to harm you if you are eager to do good? Like if you're doing the best job you can at your job, and you are working hard at that and going above and beyond, who can fault you for that? You know, or in whatever circumstance you find you're in, if you know in your heart you're pressing toward the good and you're doing the next right thing, you know, who's going to harm you for that? But he qualifies that and he says, but there are some people who will see the good and be impressed with that, and there are others who will just see you, that you're a Christian, and they're going to want to press on you. They're going to come after you. And he says, so even if you should suffer for what is right, understand you are blessed. Boy, that's a tough one right there. It's hard when you're being pressed to understand that God is doing something great in you, that something good is happening, that really I'm in a blessed state right there. But he says that, you know, remember, this is not always just about us. This is also about God. Now, as I said last week about these people that he's writing to, in the culture they're in, everything is religious, which is interesting to me. Even though it's a pagan culture, everything that they encounter has to do with the gods that they worship in that Greco-Roman culture. If you wanted to go do business in the marketplace like I talked about first, sure, you can do business here, but you got to pay homage to this god. Or another example might be the water that's provided in several of the cities in this area. They would have seen this water as being provided by their particular god. So if you were to go and get water, again, one of the first things that you may have to do is you may have to put a little incense in the deal, worship their god, and then you can get the water. Because you know what? That community believed that that particular god, whichever one they worshiped, provided the water. In fact, they believed that their gods provided everything that they needed. In fact, you might hear a conversation where they're like, you know, wow, I sure am thankful that the god Athena provides everything that we need. You know, we don't have to worry. She's going to give us all the food and the right weather for our crops and the water and everything. But if you're a Christian and you come there to get water, once again, you're going to smack up against that culture. And there's going to be a real time of testing where you have to make a decision. You know, what am I going to do here? How am I going to stand for my faith in the midst of the needs that I have? Who do I trust? And that's the dilemma that they face so often back in that time. Now, they would have been very much outcast, very much even banished in some of these communities. You know, the Christians would have to struggle to go from one place to the next to figure out just how to live. And you know, you fast forward to today, we don't think about it like they think about it, like they would have read this letter. It's very different for us. I wouldn't say we're exactly persecuted for our faith. We don't live in hostile environments, do we? You know, for the most part, I mean, we're just accepted, and what we believe is fine. But I will say this. We are living and moving further into what we call a post-Christian culture. It's not the norm to be a Christian. It's not the norm to go to church. It's really not even the norm to live the Christian lifestyle. In fact, in many places, you may have encountered this, your Christian values have smacked up against the world. And you found it to be very difficult to live out your faith. And so in that way, we are experiencing a little more of what these people may have understood. Now, let me just give you a couple of examples of how this may play out for us. I mean, and these aren't, like really harsh, persecuted kind of things, but these are things that we might come against, examples of ways that it may be difficult for us. Number one, like just think about our finances. Just imagine this scenario, it's after Christmas, you get your Visa bill. Don't imagine that. Now you're not thinking about me. All right, to focus, on what we're talking about. But you get your bill, and you hold it up, and you scream out, who did this, Oh, it was me. Okay, all right. So anyway, I got to deal with this. But, you're looking back, you got right there the last 2 weeks of Christmas. Oh, no, man, what did we do? What were we thinking? And you were spending on the card, and your wife was spending on the card. Nobody understood what was happening, and now we got this dilemma facing us. So you got that bill sitting there. And then the next thing the Dish Network bill comes in, or the cable bill, or whatever. And, of course, you bought the NFL, Sirius package, the super mega deal where you can watch every single ball game that goes on in the Cosmos all at once, And you get that bill that comes in on top of the Visa bill, and you're like, oh, it's this bill. But anyway, it's the playoffs, and Super Bowl's coming. What am I going to do? I got to pay that one. So, and then your power bill and your mortgage and the car payments. You got to do that. And all these things start lining up, and you realize I'm digging myself into a hole, and I'm pressed in this way. What am I going to do? Something's got to change. I got to do something quick, or we're in big trouble. And then at the end of that line of bills, there is the tithe. The tithe. And you ponder it for a minute. And maybe you think, maybe just 6 months without the tithe. 6 months get me back in shape. Maybe a year, but 6 months for sure, and then we'll kind of evaluate as we go along. But we're going to just, I think maybe we can just put this on hold, and maybe come back and deal with all this other stuff later. Because you know what? If I don't pay my mortgage, the creditor, they're going to come. They're coming after me. And I'm pretty sure the church doesn't have secret police that come get you if you don't pay your tithe, or, there's not an angel named Guido. So I think that maybe, we'll just put this on hold. Now, there's a couple of problems with that, right? By the way, there is no angel named Guido, and those kinds of things don't happen to us. We don't pay our tithe, but there's issues with this. Number one is we're taking this easy way out. This easy way out. And it's easy because we can cut that, and we're not going to feel anything immediate, probably. You never know, you might, but probably not. And so we're gonna pay, for the NFL package. I don't mean to lay guilt on you, man. If you got the NFL package, just hang in there with me. But I'm just using this example. We're going to pay this stuff, and we'll deal with God later. That's the easy way out. The second problem with this is it's an issue of trust, isn't it? It's an issue of trust. In doing that, I'm saying, God, I don't trust you to help me deal with my finances and to make this right. I don't trust you to help me in this time. I don't trust you, when I have to cut all this other stuff to pay this tithe. I don't believe that you can really help me in this way. I believe in you in every other way but my finances. It's, that's an issue of our heart. And in that moment, we're pressed to what we really value. We're pressed in what we really believe. Boy, isn't it something how finances are always such a test? Such a test. And then, just speaking on this issue of finances, oftentimes I know that we run our finances right up to the edge, man. Like we're just getting everything paid off barely at the end of the month, and sometimes we're even running in the red. And we're lacking this thing that is important in our life called margin. Have you heard of this word? It's awesome. Margin is like at the end of the month, I actually have some left over. And you know why margin, Dave Ramsey, Financial Peace, he talks about this. Margin is so important because margin helps us, A, with emergencies, but also, I think more importantly, margin helps us so that when we get to a point where all of a sudden there's an opportunity to help, to do something extra, to give in a particular way, to see, somebody who has needs to go in and help them out, we have the margin. And we can do that when God calls us to do it. But when we don't have it, it's just like we miss these great opportunities. Side note here, if you're right now sitting here and in your heart you're going, I'm struggling financially, I could use some help, man, I'm telling you that the Financial Peace deal that Dave Ramsey does that we're doing here at this church, sign up for it. Just don't even question it. Don't even ask, should I or shouldn't I, or when is it? Just sign up. I'm telling you, it is a great step toward getting that figured out for you. So anyway, I'll just throw that out there to you. But this is one way. Finances are always this place where we find ourselves tested. Am I going to do the right? Am I going to do the good, or am I not? Another place, and this is actually a real example, but I'm going to call this guy Bob. Bob came to me one day and was sharing about an incident that happened to him, and he was actually going through it when he came to me. He worked for a company, and he was kind of a mid-level guy. And one day, his boss, his supervisor, came to him. And let me back up and tell you what had happened. They'd had 2 quarters of bad numbers. And his supervisor was about to lose his job as a result of this. So his supervisor comes to him and says, listen, I need your help. We're about to put together some numbers for the end of this quarter, and I really need you to help me to change some numbers. We need this quarter to show up really good. He said, listen, if you'll help me do this, and obviously you get what I'm saying, this was not right what he was asking him to do. He said, if I help you do this, I promise I'm going to make it good for you. I know there's a promotion coming up. I know there's an opportunity for you, and I'm going to make that happen if you'll just work with me on this. And so Bob, kind of caught off guard, didn't say anything, and so the supervisor said, great, I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll work this out. So Bob goes home, doesn't tell his wife, goes to bed that night. He said, Rusty, I'm laying there in the bed, and I can't sleep. And he said, it is the proverbial angel on this shoulder and devil on this shoulder. And he said, as corny as that is, in moments like this, it's about as real as it gets. And he said, and this devil over here was jumping up and down on my shoulder saying, yes, this is it. This is awesome. You just go in, you fudge some numbers, no big deal. Probably nobody's really going to find out about it. You get the promotion, you get the money, you get to do all the stuff you and your family want to do, and the vacations, and you get to buy the thing. This is great. And he said, man, that thing was so loud, I couldn't hear this angel over here saying, you know it's not right. You know it's not right. So he went through that night, barely any sleep, gets up the next morning, goes to the office, goes to the conference room, supervisor comes in, sits down, opens up the laptop and says, all right, let's get to work. Bob says, I can't. And he says, you can't what? You can't get these numbers figured out, or what are you thinking? He goes, I can't do this. He says, it's not right. He said, Bob, I'm telling you, I've already told you, I'm going to help you. This is going to go well for you. And he said, look, you may not understand this, but my faith doesn't allow me to do this, so I choose not to do it. And he gets up and he walks out. The scenario plays out over time. Bob doesn't get the promotion. He is overlooked. His boss actually is eventually fired, and a new supervisor comes in, but because of the situation, Bob is now stuck in his position for doing the right thing. And I think about him and his heart, and how genuine and sincere Bob was as he's telling me this story, and how much you could see, I am so committed to doing the right thing because something has been done good to me. I choose to do the right thing, no matter what. And you know, it's in that moment that I think that we really find out who we are. I think that it's in those moments when we're pressed and when compromise is sitting right there on the table and it looks so good and it looks so easy and maybe nobody would know but me and God. We really find out what we believe and what we value and what we're all about. And I think it's also in those moments that we're given an opportunity to become something we've never become before. To move to a place that we've never been before in our faith and to understand what we're really made of. And you know, we may be called to do this. If you haven't been, you may be in the future. And you may have an opportunity to serve the Lord in this way. And you know, here's some things that I know about suffering, and I'm going to list these. There's several things. Suffering does things for us. Number one, suffering identifies us with Christ. The Bible tells us that in several places. Suffering identifies us with Christ, aligns us with Him. And that's true because we remember when Christ came here to this earth, He didn't live some cushy life, he didn't have it made. He was constantly hounded by the Pharisees and the Sadducees and people who were out to get him because of what he was doing. All the while, he's healing people. He's doing this good thing that God has called him to do. And then at the end of his life, what does he get? More suffering, right? And eventually ends up on the cross, serving God in this important way and really serving you and I. But he's doing this for this ultimate good, this ultimate will and plan of salvation that God has. And so every time that we align ourselves as Christians or little Christs, followers of Christ, when we find ourselves in a place of suffering, it's as if we are in that moment becoming and identifying more with Christ, maybe even than other times in our life. Jesus suffered as a righteous man for the unrighteous. You know that? He did that for the one who was beating him, the one who was nailing him to the cross. He's like, man, I am suffering. I hope I suffer more for your sake that you come to know God. Whenever I come to this, I think about specifically our students, college students, junior high school. It's tough. Now, all of us who are older, we always say, man, my generation was tough, man. It was, we had it rough, boy. I think having teenagers, maybe it's a little tougher, for real. The access to things that we've never had access to, the opportunity for a student to fall in so many ways. I could list all the ways, but I don't have to this morning. It's difficult. If you're a high schooler, you've committed your heart to Christ, I commend you for what you do. And there are plenty of opportunities to compromise and to give in and to give up on this Christianity in the face of pressure and the need to mold and become like everything else. And I just want to encourage you, if you're a college student, it really doesn't get a whole lot better. While there is kind of I think a revolution happening among college campuses, Christianity is really taking hold. Hey, there's this whole other part of the world that's happening there in college too. I know that. But also there's this increasingly non-Christian influence that's happening on universities as well. If you're a college student, commend you. Hang in there. Be strong. I think about what Paul said in Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And every time you stand firm, hope enters this world. It's like Paul says, hey, Peter says, always be prepared to give an answer for the hope that is in you. Because every time you stand firm, there may be somebody watching going, wow, I want what they got. Another thing that suffering does, or that suffering is not unique to you. You might think at times when you're going through it, I am the only person who's ever gone through this. Or even better, you may think, God is picking on me. Have you seen the movie Bruce Almighty? Remember when Jim Carrey makes the comment, God is a mean kid with a magnifying glass, and I'm the ant, he's just burning me. Well, that's not true. And it's not unique to you. And there are many other people, like even right now, who are suffering for the cause of Christ in ways that we can't even possibly imagine. And I think about those who've already suffered for us. We stand on the shoulders of them. These people that Peter was writing to, their faith, their commitment, their willingness to stick it out. Our faith is based on their willingness to do that in many ways. And you know what's interesting? If you were to go to Rome today, and if you've been there, you know this. When you see the buildings in the city of Rome, if you look all the way across the horizon, what you'll see are crosses on many of these buildings. It's like you can't go anywhere without seeing a cross. And that's true because of the influence of the Vatican and the Catholic Church and all this kind of stuff, but it's also because Christianity took hold in that place at one time. And I just think it would be interesting to go back in time to these people and say, hey, let me tell you something, all you who are suffering back here in the year 2000, or the year 2,000 years ago, to go back to them and say, you know what? There is coming a day in about 300 to 400 years when there will be buildings in Rome with crosses on them. Can you imagine what they would think of you? You're a nutcase. We're just this little, small religion, this movement of Christ followers that Rome hates and barely even knows about and really would just love for to go away. How is it possible that we could influence Rome? It would be like changing the world. Yeah, that's right. That's you, baby. That's what happens. And we remember that it was because of what they did that this movement spread around the world. And it's like because of what we do, it's still spreading around the world. We are not alone. Another truth is that suffering is a clarifier. It's hard if you've never really experienced any kind of suffering in your life to understand what I mean here, but if you have, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Suffering oftentimes clarifies our values and our beliefs for us. Somebody said this: if the foundation of your happiness is your vocation, your relationships, or your money, then suffering takes your source of joy away from you. But if your ultimate value in life is God, then suffering drives you closer to your source of joy, who is God. Because suffering is a clarifier. Suffering is also what I call a galvanizer. I think that's a word, galvanizer. But you know what I mean by that? It bonds something. Galvanizing is when something is bonded together. And I think that suffering oftentimes can bond us together. For example, if you're a husband and wife and you're having to suffer this thing together, whatever it is, for the sake of the good, it can bond your relationship together as you work this thing out. Or with your friends who are praying for you and encouraging you, with your small group, and of course, ultimately with God, your relationship with Him changes when you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I have nothing but God. I am out of resources, I am out of emotional strength, I am out of everything that I need, and God goes, good, because it ain't about you. I need you to depend 100% on me, and let me help you work this thing out. And the last thing here, and I have to be very careful with how we open this one, but suffering has a reward. Now, certainly we don't find suffering so that we can have a reward, but suffering does have a reward. There is a time when God's justice will be meted out. And that good that we've done, even if, it was difficult for our life, or we were doing good and paying for it, and other people were doing wrong and didn't seem like they were paying for it, all that, you don't have to worry about all that. It's like my sister, who was a counselor in drug and alcohol rehab. She said, you know what, so many people come in and they give up 30 minutes before the miracle. They've been working on this for months, and all of a sudden they decide it's too hard and they give up. And she's like, oh my gosh, don't give up now. That could be true of any of us, We worked through it so hard, we stuck it out, we had faith, and all of a sudden we decide, I'm done with God, I give up on this whole thing, and we may be 30 minutes from the miracle. Now, remember, 30 minutes in God's time may not be 30 minutes in our time. It may mean 30 days or something else, but God's like, man, don't do this. Hang in there. Have some vision about what's out there. Jesus said in Matthew 5, He said, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. It's like, man, at the end of the day, I'm going to take care of all this. There is a reward. And if I could take you back to the story of Bob for a minute. Bob went home after that very difficult day, and he finally told his wife what was going on. And at first, she was a little heartbroken and disappointed because he wasn't going to get the promotion, and they'd been so excited about, being able to maybe do some things. But then on the other hand, as they prayed together, which was something they didn't do very often, all of a sudden, the clarity came into their life. And they talked about things they'd never talked about before. And he said, Rusty, I'm telling you, that one decision has brought more happiness and more contentment into my life than 1,000 fixing numbers and promotions and more money could ever have done. You see, God is for us in all these turns. He's plotting and managing the troubles that we face with far-reaching purposes for our good, for the glory of Jesus Christ. Let's pray. So, Father, today we are really humbled that you chose us, that you believe in us to carry your word, to bring light to the darkness, to expand your kingdom, to do all the things that you need done. That you would choose to use us, people who are broken oftentimes, people who doubt, who struggle, who run away, who fall away, who in moments of testing we give up. And your grace is lavished on us and you give us another opportunity. But God, I pray for every one of us this morning that we would be reminded that the suffering we do for you, that the moments when it's hard and we choose to do the right thing, that while it's not easy, and we don't always see an immediate reward from that, we can be sure that you are with us, that you are for us, and that you are working that out in the end. So thank you. Thank you for reminding us we're not left alone. That you have a purpose and a plan for every single one of our lives. And that's being worked out in the good or the bad or the difficult or the easy, whatever it is that comes our way, God, when we give our hearts solely to you, and we don't rely on this world, and we don't swim with the culture, all these kinds of things, God, when we genuinely look to you, that you are working this out. So God, for all of us, I'm praying for strength, for courage, to stand up, to hold true to the values that you've given us. And we pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.